Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Mastering Midlife, How to Thrive When the World Asks the Most of You. I am your host, Mark Silverman. Today, I get to speak to Katherine Webster. She is a new friend. She has a design and creation company called Katherine Webster Design and Creation. She's a writer. She's an artist. She's a designer. She's a self-proclaimed fear survivor, which I can't wait to learn about that because I don't know about you guys, but I deal with fear from day to day, and I want to hear what her take on it. In my research on Katherine, I came across this sentence that she describes about herself. She says, the most important phase of her life's work began after a tragedy. So we're going to be talking to her about that. She wrote a book called Becoming Madam Widow. It's a fresh perspective on being 50 and single. So that just starts us on the hero's journey of finding out what Katherine's about. Katherine, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Mark, for having me.
So, I did some research on the book, but our listeners haven't. So what was the tragedy that set this part of your life's work on?
Well, my husband, who was also my business partner, and I were just embarking on a brand new, very exciting project in the women's high-end fashion accessory business. I was actually in Paris on business, and he was here. And he went to the hospital for some routine surgery. And when they did the surgery, they gave him a blood thinner, which over 3 agonizing days killed him. And it happened so suddenly because he was a very, very healthy man and very full of life and didn't even take an aspirin for a headache. So it came as a shock to everyone we knew, but especially to me, because suddenly I was left with a business and with a whole series of things that had been really not very well managed. And I have to give anybody advice, if you're in a partnership, make sure you've got life insurance and you've got all your ducks in a row, because you never know what's going to happen. This is something that I can look back over my shoulder and say, it would have been a great thing if I would have had a little more financial support, because that'll crimp your style. Not having money always crimps your style. But anyway, as much as it was a tragedy, and I almost hate to use that word, it was also a bit of a gift for me. As a matter of fact, it was a big gift for me because it taught me how to manage a whole series of things in my life that I hadn't really been paying attention to before, because I had some protection and I was living in a bit of my own self-created cocoon. So I learned to deal with things like fear and things like hopelessness and things like worry. And as I began to manage the fear and as I began to step outside my comfort zone, my world started to expand and I started to take more chances and do things that I probably wouldn't have done if I was inside that relationship.
So make that real for us. How old were you when this happened?
48.
So 48. Did you guys have children?
No, because both of us were career people. So I think if I would have had children, or if I'm speaking to people who have children, I'm not sure how to. I'm thinking that you would have a little more of a support network because you have family, but then you have a greater responsibility depending on the age of your children as well. If you're planning on sending them to college and suddenly there's only one of you providing, that may be add another layer to your challenge.
Yeah, but
I mean, either way, it's a different situation. I mean, I did not have children. I just had business.
Right. So, yeah, I interviewed a woman named Simi Polanski who has a fashion business in New York, and she lost her husband very early in life with 3 small children, and she was pregnant. And
Wow.
So she had a very, she had a similar tragedy or challenge, but she had a different perspective on that. For you, being a 48-year-old woman in this society, which is, I think, why you have your mission in life. At 48, there's a very different perspective of you on life. So you're kind of like, you have to tough it out alone. So the fears. Tell me about what went through your mind when you were suddenly on your own.
Well, one of the first things, I didn't have a lot of time to sit and mourn in the situation because I kind of had to start taking care of estate issues almost immediately. So within the first couple of weeks, when I went to see my attorney, he informed me that I had a lien on the house because my husband had failed to pay some tax, and I had to get past all of this. And so I had a whole series of financial obligations and commitments. And my business, the business that I'd started, this particular business that I started with my husband, was not a going concern yet. So I had to work plus deal with a whole series of straightening out of things in my life and remnants of what was left over. And I think that may have been one of the reasons that he became ill so quickly, because I think he was a little overwhelmed by some things that were going on in the business. So, but he didn't want to share them with me, which if he would have, then I probably would have been able to help him manage that. So I was left to contend with all of these problems, estate issues. I had a great big country house, which was older. It needed a lot of work. I had to try and maintain the house by myself, and I didn't realize how much he had contributed until he wasn't there to contribute anymore.
So what was the fear? So how did the fear come in?
Well, I became afraid of everything. I was worried about money. I was worried about how I was going to manage the house. There's a whole series of fears that can affect us. I mean, fear of being alone, fear of poverty, fear of growing old alone, fear of loss of liberty, a whole series of fears that we experience. And so what you have to do is basically learn to manage it. I'm not sure you can eliminate fear from your life. Fear is going to always be there, but you have to learn to manage the fear and just take those steps forward and say, okay, I'm not going to be afraid for the next half an hour, and then continue to go on from there. And every day, every night I'd go to bed and say, okay, you survived another day. So tomorrow's another one, and you'll see how it, and this is, now it's been 4 years, you see, since he passed away, and I'm still here. And in the meantime, I've done a whole series of things that I probably would not have done if I was still in that married state. You know, I've got some art that's on display and being sold in a New York City gallery. I've got a second book coming out. I'm writing for a style and design magazine. These are things that I created on my own once I got past all of the estate issues and all of the financial issues and got everything in order, because there's always a way. There's always a way to manage this stuff. You can either hire someone to help you, or you can ask for some help, or try and wade through it yourself. But the fact was that once I got all that out of the way, then I started to recreate and redesign my life the way I wanted it to be.
So there's a missing link for me in your conversation. I know it, and I know it's there. You know, so there's the shell-shocked woman who lost her husband and then had to deal with all this stuff, and then deal with the fear, and deal with the emotions, and deal with the grief, and still dig herself out to see what's on the other side. And then there's there's the accomplished woman who's an artist, who's a writer, who's a speaker, who does all these things. How did you make that transition? Can you walk us through the bridge and the baby steps you took to discover yourself?
Yes. The first thing I did was I looked at the easiest things that I could do first, taking, as you call them, baby steps. Is a very important part of the whole process. I looked at myself and I said, okay, I don't want to be a middle-aged relic. And I noticed that being in a marriage for 15 years, I was wearing my hair in kind of a suburban housewife type style. I'd really lost the edge in terms of my style. So I said, okay, time for a new image. This is what I'm going to do first. I'm going to change my hair, which is a great thing that, of course, women can do, change the way I dress, go back to a more edgy, bohemian, elegant style, because I'm going to recreate the way I look. So I did that first.
Now, were you doing that to attract men, or for you to help?
No, I was doing it for myself. Right. It was a little too early for me to date. So what I wanted to do, I felt that when I stepped out of my house, I wanted to step out as a new woman with a whole new series of possibilities in front of me, and therefore I wanted to look a little different. I knew when I met Lex that I had a particular style, and once we got into marriage and the comfort of the marriage, things evolved, and you kind of relax your style. I spent a lot of time in sweatpants and casual jeans, and I said, you know what, time for me to take a look at how I look and how I'm looking to the world, and who am I now? And that is the big question when you go through a tragedy. Is the first thing you have to say is, okay, who am I now? And that's what I did, because people, they're sort of sitting on the sidelines, and initially people are very sympathetic to your tragedy. But after as little as a couple of weeks, they want to move on themselves, and they want to see you move on as well, if those people are your friends or people that you know really well. So you need to start thinking, okay, what's the first step? Well, I'll do what I know. And what I know is I'm going to pamper myself a little. I'm going to change my hair. I'm going to change the way I look and create a new self-image. In addition to that, I changed a little bit of my living space. I made it more in tune with my needs. Softened some of the design, started dining in a different way, drinking the kind of wine that I always liked, but this happens to be old world. My husband liked, South American Chilean wines, and I said once he was no longer with me that I was only going to drink, some of the old world product, and I was going to make sure that I treated myself very well. I was going to eat the foods I wanted, and then I started to travel alone as well. Now, I'd done some of this before in business, but now I was taking vacations. And that taught me a lot about the world. And I also was able to make some wonderful friends in different places by being on my own.
Talk a little bit more about traveling by yourself. That the first couple of.
Oh, people are petrified of it. They're petrified of it, and they shouldn't be, because you see, and I do mention in the book as well that there are now a lot of travel companies, whether it's a cruise line or a different kind of a travel company, or resorts, that don't have that single supplement, because more and more people are finding that they don't want to wait around for apartments. They want to take an exotic vacation, and maybe with a mind to meeting some other like-minded individuals. So I started to travel on my own and found it very enlightening. I met people, I was more open, I did what I wanted, and I noticed that a lot of people that I was watching when I was on vacations weren't even really focused on where they were. They were sort of bickering and disagreeing on where to go, how much money to spend. And I almost laughed, because I said, I'm in charge of my own situation now. And this is a great opportunity. I went to New York City for a weekend and just pampered myself. I went to France again. I went to southern Italy. I just had the greatest time exploring on my own. And I didn't feel frightened at all.
Nice. So
if you are if you're nervous about it, the first thing I was going to say about it, if you're nervous about it, and you're nervous about being alone, because a lot of people are really uncomfortable with the concept of being alone, take yourself out for a cup of coffee first. Take yourself out for lunch next. Take yourself out for dinner, and don't feel conspicuous or feel the need to drag along a lot of technology, because people are not looking at you and pointing and saying, look at that poor pathetic creature that's on their own. You are an independent person. And when I was in Paris, I'd go for lunch at places like La Durée, and I'd see these beautifully coiffed women who were out shopping, or some of them are businesswomen, and they had absolutely no problem at all going to a fine restaurant, ordering a glass of champagne, ordering a lovely lunch by themselves. And Europeans will do that. But here we feel the need to drag, notebook computers and all kinds of different paraphernalia, because we're so uncomfortable with the idea of going out and doing something like dining alone and then traveling alone.
Yeah, that's something that I learned a long time ago. I really, and I was surprised that I was okay with going out to dinner alone, going to a movie alone, doing things by myself. And I think that's really helped calm me down in life and not have to need a partner.
It is really kind of, when you get to know yourself on that level, then you realize how much you are growing. I said in the early days that I was an acquired taste to myself, but now I'm in a situation where I feel almost I have to take another person's feelings into consideration. Naturally, I do like to sometimes join people, but I have no issue at all with traveling anywhere alone. And I find
you're a choice now, so it's a lot more relaxed.
Yeah, so that's where I started. I started with doing things that were very mechanical. I started by figuring out solutions to problems. My husband and I had a technology business as well, but he was the technical guy and I did the creative work. So when there were creative problems with anything, I would have a meltdown. I would sit down on the sofa and just cry. And one time I threw a mouse at a beautiful HP screen that he'd bought me, a monitor, and cracked it, and it was just like a dumb thing. And I thought, well, I would never do that now. You see, but I did it then because I was just so overwhelmed by the whole business of being left on my own with everyday details. I mean, there were just a lot of house maintenance things. The house was old and it needed certain coddling, and I was not necessarily in a position to do this by myself. So, I had to find ways when we'd have snow, and there was tons of it, and the snowblower, I didn't know how to work it, and I didn't think it was working anyway. I would go out and start shoveling the snow, and I saw the men out there in the neighborhood, and I knew that someone would take pity on me and blow the snow out of the driveway, and it worked. And there were sometimes when I used the widow thing, yeah, I used it. I mean, I'm a feminist, but I still figured that sometimes you have to use whatever tools you have before you. And I also found that there was a way to deal with technology companies, and that there were ways to deal with a whole series of things until you were ready to make the move to potentially sell the house and move into something that's a lot more personal.
Hmm. So one of the things that you say is whether you're alone by fate or by choice, you'll learn to have more fun, not to have a mate in or out of the bedroom, and that you'll be able to satisfy your needs on your own. Talk more about that.
Yes,
yes, I went there.
I did a radio interview a number of months ago in February when the topics were how to amuse yourself in the winter months. And I said that one of the things that you could do when you were suddenly single, either by choice or because of a divorce or a death like this, is that you would explore your own sexuality in a way that you hadn't done before. And there's a lot of information, especially for women, on really understanding your own body. So this is a great time for you to prepare yourself for potentially moving forward in that direction should you want to take a partner in the future. And one of the things that you might want to do is also look at making yourself feel more feminine. I think you should have a drawer full of frilly panties. And I think that you should start to acquire these, because once you've been in a marriage for a few years, then you're sort of into the sports bras and real comfortable stuff. And then suddenly when you're single, you say, well, this is a great opportunity for me to start to embellish a little bit.
Mm.
So yes, I mean, there's all of these things that could be explored. It opens up a tremendous world of opportunity that is well beyond the world of business, but the world of personal as well. I mean, you can make yourself into as much or as little of a confection as you like by exploring a whole series of things that had always occurred to you, but you never really did.
Yeah,
One
I
of them
noticed.
is sex.
Yeah, so I noticed when my wife and I separated, it took her a couple of years, but soon her bedroom became so lovely and feminine and beautiful, and she started to dress. Every time she went out the door, she looked like $1,000,000, and
Wow.
and she started to not only reinvent herself, but invent herself probably as more authentic than ever before. And I think that's what.
And what did you think about that, Mark?
I loved it. I love my ex-wife dearly, and I wanted her to thrive. And she's learned to sing. She didn't sing before, and she sings with bands and in a choir. And she does all kinds of things that she hadn't done before, and looks like $1,000,000. And it's really a beautiful thing to see because it's authentic now. When she was younger, she was always one of the prettiest women ever in the room. But she dressed like Madonna, or it was all the way you were supposed to. And now she has a style all her own. So when you were describing,
You see, so then we're talking about something that is dear to my heart, and that is that decade by decade, if you want to divide it into a decade, you go through periods of time that are age appropriate and fresh and new and different and exciting. And these people that tend to cling to a look, a style, or embrace whatever they did in their 20s when they're now in their 40s and 50s really are missing out on some true joy, because your wife is like another woman friend of mine who was divorced. She decided that she wanted to learn to fly airplanes. So she took flying lessons and then switched her career very suddenly and began to fly for a small commercial airline. And this was an exciting thing because within the marriage or the relationship she was in, she wouldn't have pursued it. But suddenly when she was on her own, the world became her oyster, or she took the opportunity. If you want to, I mean, a lot of people, they wallow in the thing for years, whether it's a death or it's a divorce, and this is a really unhealthy place to be. You really need to say, okay, you have your time for grieving, whether that be divorce or whether it be a death, but then you need to start to take very small steps. And one of the things that you do is to start to change some of the habits. I have a woman friend who lost her husband to cancer probably 7 years ago, and she's still living in the same house, which I've advised her is probably not healthy, even though it's a lovely house, and has never taken the cover off the barbecue, and still goes shopping at Costco because that's where they went. And I said, but you're living alone. You really don't need to buy the 2 chickens. You really should find a different way to live, but you're in this place, and he's not coming back. So changing that would probably make you ultimately a happier woman if you just began to, in a very small way, change, and then that grows into bigger things. It starts off with small mechanical things that you can understand, the physical things, and then you move into the more conceptual things. Like your ex-wife, who's now singing and doing all things that she probably would have not done within the marriage.
Right. Well, and she was raising kids and all that. So the book is Becoming Madam Widow, which is really cool. You said you're writing a new book.
The book is finished. I'm doing this thing right now. I've got this fantastic marketing plan worked out, incorporating all social media, and I'm trying to manage a blog situation with WordPress, which is not difficult. WordPress is supposed to be the easiest, but being a technical dunce that I am, I'm hobbling through it to try and create this entire sphere, and I need help from the audience out there that I'm hoping to attract to name the book, because I have a couple of names, but I don't like it. So I want people to follow this trail of breadcrumbs that I'm going to leave, and it's kind of an exciting new project.
Great. So what we'll do is we'll put the link in the show notes so people can follow you and help you name that book.
Right, and that I'm naming everything on that venue. It's all going to be under Madam Widow, even though I have a website, katherinewebster.com, and my book, of course, is available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and so on. But then I'm using the Madam Widow, and I'm going to be putting excerpts from the book so people can actually sort of read about it and understand it, and then potentially recommend a good name for this novel, which is a feminist romantic thriller.
That sounds great. I'm sure you have an audience for that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more women than you would know that are in that situation, that are looking for. Yeah, I love to look at women as, having their own situation where they're adventurers. You see, the woman as an adventurer is different from the male adventurer, the Indiana Jones type style. Even though they try and paint a badass woman as being that same type, and they do that on media and in video games, women have their own series of issues and overcoming these things and challenges and so on. That becomes the woman adventurer, and it's now being addressed. Part of it is sexual, but part of it is also conquering some of the things that have been in the way for women before, and it's a very exciting time.
Very. You paving the way from going from middle-aged miserable to midlife magnificent is such a wonderful thing. I really suggest that people follow you and learn to become the butterflies that they are. Katherine, thank you so much.
It is the best, yes, and I want to tell you, I believe, and I want to add this, that I think that this age is the best age.
Cool, and we don't even know what age that is. Like we can do the math if people were listening closely, but we don't. I think any age that we are is the best age there is, personally.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for taking the time and sharing such great wisdom and the enthusiasm. I love the life in your voice. Really, really, the enthusiasm for life is infectious.
Well, I appreciate this opportunity. This is talking to you. You have a lot of energy as well, and sometimes people that interview me are not as excited about what they're doing, but I can see from following you on social media and so on that there's a lot of power there, and it's really an exciting place. It's an exciting person to see and watch.
Thank you. Thank you. For the people who are listening, this is my passion, is bringing people like you who have lived life and can give them pearls of wisdom so that they can thrive as life asks a lot of them. So I will put all the in the show notes, how to get in touch with Katherine. I will, and how to follow her, how to find her new book. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
And to everybody else, I really appreciate your time and attention as always. Thank you. I love you, and have a great rest of the day.